welcome to Rise to Liberty podcast. Okay, let's try this again. Let me know in the chat if there are any audio issues that you can hear on on your side. I will make sure and get that taken care of if there are. I do know exactly what the issue is. Otherwise, let's get into this, shall we? Let's see. So, first things first, one thing I want to do is bring up a sponsor. The only sponsor that I feel, at least at this point in time, is worth having. And that is, of course, Nadeau Shave Co. This is without a doubt the best razor that you could possibly have, in my opinion, as far as male or female. Either way, go for Nadeau Shave Co. It is a family-owned, veteran-owned, family-operated business, and this company was born out of rejecting the COVID mandates. So, I mean, what could be better than this? This is a company that actually cares about their customers, and this is a cool way to be able to help the channel. Obviously, with the topics we cover, there's no way that I'm ever going to be monetized. So we've got to look for different routes to be able to help out the channel. So head over to nadeaushavaeco.com and pick up a razor today. Make sure and use promo code RISE15, RISE15, to get 15% off at checkout. Okay, so let's get into this. We will be starting a series covering the False Memory Syndrome Foundation and exposing exactly where it comes from, who these people are, what gives it legitimacy. But first and foremost, there's something I would like to start today's show with, and that is a quote. This quote comes from Judith Herman and her book, Trauma and Recovery. To preface this real quick, I view this as a really important subject, which is why I'm covering this in the first place. And I think that this quote encapsulates all of that, why I'm doing this. It is very tempting to take the side of the perpetrator. All the perpetrator asks is that the bystander do nothing. He appeals to the universal desire to see, hear, and speak no evil. The victim, on the contrary, asks the bystander to share the burden of pain. The victim demands action, engagement, and remembering. And like I said, I think that completely encapsulates the reason as to why I'm doing this, why I think this is so important. Real quick, if there's anyone watching this coming over from the No Way Jose channel, we have covered this over there. Make sure and go check his channel out if you haven't. That is No Way Jose, YouTube, Rumble, all the places. Tower Gang Jose on X. This is going to be covering things that we've covered over there. However, we are going to go a bit more in depth here. So there are going to be new tidbits, new pieces of information, and just a little bit more in depth for anyone who has watched over there. So there is going to be new stuff. This will be interesting if you have watched over there. For the audio listeners, we are streaming right now over to Podbean right now. For the audio listeners, I will make sure and include the link to the threads that we will be going through. However, they are on my X page. You can go, it's just pinned right at the top. Part 1, the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, and their primary purpose. Geez. Let's see. So one thing I want to bring up real quick, Jenny Marie Hatch. She's a wonderful guest. I've had her on my show and I've been on her show. Definitely go check out her show. It's absolutely wonderful. One of the few shows that I actually pay attention to. Just because I don't have the time, but there are certain people that I like to make sure to pay attention to, and her show is one that I definitely watch. So make sure and go check that out. And you can go check out our interview that we have done anywhere you listen to podcasts. So, with that being said, let's get into this. This is going to be False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Let's see if I can zoom in on this for everyone and get this as big as possible. Okay, I think that should do it. Yeah. Okay. Part 1. The False Memory Syndrome Foundation's primary purpose is castigation of survivors and therapists for fabricating accusations of SRA or satanic ritual abuse or cult abuse. This also covers organized abuse. Dismissing SRA as hysteria or false memory is the point. The CIA have interest in diverting attention as MKUltra and SRA merge into one. It's the weird world of exotic rites, bizarre rituals, and unspeakable cults. So let's get into it, shall we? The False Memory Syndrome Foundation board is almost exclusively composed of former CIA and military doctors currently or previously employed by major universities. None have backgrounds in ritual abuse. Their common interest is behavior modification. I do find it interesting that none of these doctors do actually have a background in trauma, which is very interesting, but we'll get a bit more into that as we go. Let's see here. So, first person I want to introduce you to is a man by the name of Martin T. Orne. He is a senior CIA/Navy researcher. He was based out of Pennsylvania University's Experimental Psychiatry Laboratory. He's an original member of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation's advisory board. The life of false accusations from the media come from paid operatives such as Dr. Martin T. Orne to conceal the crimes of the CIA. And that's that man there. He is he's an expert in hypnotherapy and hypnotism in general. It makes you wonder why the CIA would be so interested in hypnosis. And I think as the thread goes on, that we'll definitely kind of answer that. But it does just make you wonder, especially if any of this stuff is new to you. So, Orne's hypnoprogramming was financed in the 1960s by the Human Ecology Fund, a CIA cover that also funded the gruesome brainwashing and remote mind control experiments of Dr. Ewan Cameron at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute. Dr. Ewan Cameron will definitely come up later, not necessarily so much in the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, quite so much, but we will be covering him a little bit. So the Human Ecology Fund is definitely it's definitely part of this front organization that help fund CIA operations. It's very well known, very well documented. I've gone ahead and included a link to this. I believe this is the New York Times article talking about the private institutions used in the CIA's plan. And this names institutions directly. Mind you, all of this has been talked about since the 70s. That is a picture of the Allen Memorial Institute, which is still there, still being used as far as I understand. So it is a it is a well-known and documented that the CIA will create dummy corporations and tax-free foundations to act as a legitimate front. It allows the agency to fund secretive and most of the time illegal operations right in front of our eyes. Real quick, let's make sure that this won't blow out your guys' ears. This is a newscast from, let's see, I might have to, let's see. Let me bring this back up real quick to make sure that the audio is there. Okay, there we go. So this is a clip from CBS, I believe, okay, yeah, right there, 1967. This is discussing the use of dummy corporations, false fronts, basically just fake companies for the CIA to be able to launder all of their money, their black funds, because they can't ask Congress for any of these funds to be able to do any of the things that they do. Let's get into this.
The key to CIA's current troubles is that unique American institution, the Tax-Free Foundation. Here is what happened. First, CIA itself set up a number of dummy foundations, calling them by impressive-sounding, if meaningless, names. Their sole function was to channel money from the CIA to a second kind of foundation. Now, these foundations were real, some obscure, some well-known, all involved in legitimate philanthropy. But now, in addition, they agreed to become conduits for Central Intelligence, mixing up the government money with their own, and then passing it on to the ever-growing list of private organizations which, during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, were climbing aboard the CIA payroll. Let's take a closer look at those legitimate foundations which became CIA payout agencies. They are among the 15,000 charitable funds that have sprung up in America in response partly to the social consciences of the rich, partly to the structure of our tax laws. They are the operative arms of what has come to be called the American establishment, the power structure of moneyed families, august law firms, prestigious universities, which have had so much influence in shaping American life and national policy since World War II. CBS newsman Norman Glubach reports on some of the foundations which channeled money for the CIA.
This building is 73 Tremont Street, Boston. Just under...
Okay, so that's pretty much it. You can find this entire news broadcast if you do want to go find it. It is incredibly interesting. Let's see here. One thing I wanted to bring up real quick. Should have had this already pulled up, but sometimes it just doesn't work. Let's see here. Okay, so I actually went through and released an article on my Substack. Feel free to go find this. I'll post it later. This is a list of CIA businesses and fronts. The following is a list of alleged and or suspected CIA front companies, corporations, organizations used by the CIA for various purposes. The following list allegedly contains, in particular, camouflaged companies and non-governmental organizations, camouflage institutions directly controlled by the CIA and other secret organizations of the United States of America. Organizations, foundations, publishing houses, editors' offices, and institutions which have been or or are still subsidized fully or in part by the CIA. I mean, literally just any that you can think of. This was a massive list. Let's see here. There we go. So here's where it is. Beware the Mockingbird, which is my Substack. Here's the list. Just to give you an idea, it is alphabetized, but I'll kind of slowly scroll through this. Just give you an idea. We are still only in the A's, just reaching the B's. So as you can tell, this is just a massive list of organizations, publishing houses, NGOs, just everything that you could possibly think of, universities, private foundations. Like it's just all of these outlets for, I mean, there's even well-known organizations such as the Girl Scouts of the United States. Isn't really surprising once you start thinking about it. Gray Advertising Agency, Guyana Workers Confederation, which is kind of interesting because of Jonestown, Harvard University, of course, Himalayan Convention, Hobby Foundation, let's see here, Hayek Corporation, Independent Press Telegram, Independent Research Services, Indiana University, Industrial Research Services, and it just keeps going. This took me a long time to get together. Obviously, not everything was put together by me. Of course, I did take from other lists that had been put out before, so I can't take full credit for everything. It's not like I dug through all these financial records. Let's see here. Just making sure I get the right tab pulled back up. Anyways, it's not like I was able to do all of that. However, I did do some of the work. So there is that. Let's see. Let's get this pulled back up. So it is very well known and documented that the CIA will use front corporations, really any sort of organization that they can channel their money from. As far as where they get their money, that's a different discussion for a different day. I personally believe that it's typically from black operations such as gun running, drug running, human trafficking, these sorts of things. So John Marks, the author of The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, the real first book that really exposed MKUltra, John Marks was the author, like I said, of The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, but he was the one that got the first FOIA request from the CIA regarding MKUltra. So John Marks discovered in 139 boxes of documents Dr. Orn's secondary source of funding. A CIA report itemized a $30,000 grant from the Human Ecology Fund and another $30,000 from Boston's Scientific Engineering Institute, or SEI, another CIA funding cover. So 1962, CIA's behavior control research operation transferred. Behavioral research was transferred from Sidney Gottlieb and his Technical Support Division to the Office of Research and Development, ORD. Dr. Stephen Aldrich took over the leadership role, and ORD continued to probe for ways to control human behavior until 1979. At least him. I mean, it still continues to this day. And they were doing so with the space age technology that made the days of MKUltra, typically the drug experimentation, look like the horse and buggy era. Creating a subservient society was not out of sight. Aldridge uh, inaugurated Operation Often, which incorporated the occult and demonology. We get into this a little bit more later on down throughout the thread. Um, Operation Often, which incorporated the occult and demonology. Psychiatrists and behaviorists on the ORD team set off to explore the world of the supernatural and black magic. Agents spread out across the country in search of fortune tellers, palm readers, psychics, and clairvoyants. The agents would introduce themselves as researchers from the Scientific Engineering Institute, SEI, but they were dubbed the Department of the Orthodox. Dr. Martin T. Orne, with SEI funding, carved out a corner at Pennsylvania University in the early 1960s. He didn't publicize his CIA connection. In a letter to Orne, Marx reminded him that he'd denied participating in a MKUltra subproject. Orne later recanted, admitting he was aware of the source of the funding. So, one thing as you were digging through this research, especially anything related to MKUltra, there are certain institutions that keep coming up a lot, whether it be in the mainstream research or whether it be in any deeper research. But one institution that comes up a lot is Pennsylvania University. So according to the public army records, PenU, or Pennsylvania University, hosted secret experiments in the 1960s of biological agents on prisoners at Holmesburg Prison. They also tested on students at the university itself, but they most certainly tested in the 1960s all these biochemical, radiological, and directed energy weapons on prisoners at Holmesburg. Basically, they would do one of two things. They would offer them like a tiny wage. If you volunteer for this program, then you'll get 30 cents a day, or they would tell them that you would get time off your sentence. You would get different perks and all of these different things, basically coercion to try and get them to volunteer. And if they didn't volunteer, sometimes they would just do it anyways. And by sometimes, I mean a lot of the time. Consent wasn't really a big motivating factor for these guys. That they would just do this anyways. The toxins, poison gas, and other chemicals produced by Dow Chemical Company were abruptly halted in 1972 when the prison's medical lab burned to the ground. Chilling details about the human experiments at Holmesburg Prison. The people experimented on at Holmesburg Prison were subjected to particularly every form of experimentation. Mind-altering drugs, cosmetics, viruses, and chemical warfare were all on the table when it comes to human experimentation at Holmesburg. The people experimented on in the prison had very little choice or agency in the matter. Being a guinea pig meant making more money than was otherwise possible, and with doctors providing little to no information on the effects of the experiments, no one was able to make an informed decision. Like I said, informed consent, not really a stopping factor when it came to the CIA or any of these monstrous doctors. So moving ahead a little bit, testimony before the 1977 Church Committee's probe of the CIA hinted that as of 1963, the CIA's mind control experiments, codenamed MKUltra, had abandoned all military and academic laboratories fearing public exposure. See, that's just a screenshot. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. So I should have gotten this right ahead of time. Unfortunately, it's just not how it works all the time. So let's pull this up real quick. There we go.
Be brought to the attention of agency management. Information provided by him and by 2 other officers.
The CIA has gone about its business in the United States.
The subject today concerns CIA's involvement in the development of bacteriological warfare materials with the Army's biological laboratory at Fort Detrick, CIA's retention of an amount of shellfish toxin, and CIA's use and investigation of various chemicals and drugs. The relationship between the CIA and the Army Biological Laboratory at Fort Detrick as an activity requiring further investigation surfaced in late April of this year. It resulted from information provided by a CIA officer not directly associated with the project in response to my repeated directives that all past activities which might now be considered questionable be brought to the attention of agency management. Information provided by him and by 2 other officers aware of the project indicated that the project at Fort Detrick involved the development of bacteriological warfare agents, some lethal, and associated delivery systems suitable for clandestine use. A search was made for any records or other information available on the project. This search produced information about the basic agreement between the Army and the CIA relating to the project and some limited records covering its activities from its beginning in 1952 to its termination in 1970. In the course of the investigation, CIA's laboratory storage facilities were searched, and about 11 grams, a little less than half an ounce, of shellfish toxin and 8 milligrams of cobra venom were discovered in a little-used, vaulted storeroom in an agency building. A major early requirement of the agency was to find a replacement for the standard cyanide L pill issued to agents in hazardous situations during World War II. This was the basis on which eventually we discovered the shellfish toxin. The only application of this toxin was in the U-2 flight over the USSR in May 1960, during which Gary Powers carried such a device concealed in a silver dollar. In the Powers case, the grooves of the drill were filled with shellfish toxin. He obviously did not use it and was not instructed to do so. It was offered to him to provide him with an option. The Powers flight was the only time we are aware that the toxin was provided for operational use, although the L pill was made available for earlier flights. The primary agency interest was in the development of dissemination devices to be used with standard chemicals off the shelf. Various dissemination devices, such as a fountain pen dart launcher and an engine head bolt designed to release when heated, appeared to be peculiarly suited for clandestine use. Available records do not indicate that all specific items were developed exclusively for the CIA, as work on similar devices was also done for the Army. At the time the toxin was found, the officer responsible for the project in 1970 stated that he had no recollection as to how it got there. On the 30th of June, discussions were held with a retired agency officer who had provided the initial lead. This man, who had been the GS-15 branch chief in 1970, stated that the toxin had in fact been moved from Fort Detrick and stored in the laboratory. This was done on the basis of his own decision after conversations with the responsible project officer. He further stated that he made this decision based on the fact that the cost and difficulty of isolating the shellfish toxin were so great that it simply made no sense to destroy it, particularly when there would be no future source of such toxin. The current branch chief believes this explanation is correct, but still does not recall the actual act of receiving the material from Fort Detrick. Both of these middle-grade officers agree that no one, including their immediate superior, was told of the retention of the shellfish toxin.
So once again, you can go and find this. I have made this available in the thread if you would like to go watch it. But I don't know about you, but I'm just not believing them. I don't know why anyone would have the would have a reason to believe any of these criminals. I mean, you've got to think about it. So when these the church committee took place, it basically came out that, oh well, we have basically been lying to the American public for the last 20, 30 years about experimenting on people. But we're not doing it anymore. We promise. We basically, we were trying to find a Manchurian candidate, which involved stripping people of their entire being as a person and installing our own person, but it didn't work, so we just gave it up. And what was even more interesting is that Sidney Gottlieb, the head of running all of the operations at the time, the only way that he would testify in the church committee hearings would be if he was able to get immunity, which to me right there, that says volumes. That says so much. But not only that, he kind of went in and explained he explained MKUltra in a way. I was actually going to do a show on this at some point, breaking down the church committee and how much of a nothing burger it really was. The way that he described the way that things happened is that it was basically a bunch of CIA agents just sitting there and just fumbling around and being like these goofy Americans and, dosing each other. And they just made it so lighthearted, and they whitewashed the whole thing to the point where it just seems so innocent. Like, that was the testimony he gave. But when you start really digging into this, I mean, these are horrific things. I mean, just the very idea of being able to control another person, you can control their mind with or without their consent, is truly terrifying. I honestly can't think of anything more terrifying than that. Being able to control somebody, especially against their will, is absolutely terrifying. One thing I wanted to bring up real quick is, who was that talking? Let's see here. Let me pull this up. So the man that was talking, that was, let's see here. That was William Colby. Let's see. Sorry, just trying to get this set up for you guys. So, who was William Colby? William Colby was a U.S. deep politician involved in deep politics. Let's see, so just real quick, in case anyone doesn't know, a deep politician is a politician who are the hidden decision makers whose decisions generally evade scrutiny by the commercially controlled media, although the distinction between the two is somewhat fluid. Deep politicians treat politicians as puppet masters, treat puppets. The contention of the website that I'm reading from is that many leaders focused on by commercially controlled media are in fact just puppet leaders. I think that's pretty fair to say. So the deep politicians are usually the ones actually making the decisions that usually have sway. They're the ones who you should probably pay attention to if you're involved in any of this. So he was the director of the CIA, which anyone who's running the CIA, in my opinion, is going to be somebody of significant importance. So he ran the CIA from 1973 to 1976, pretty short time, all things considered, and he died in a suspicious boating accident. They still can't agree on why he died. But considering what he was just talking about, with the fact that the CIA had actually isolated shellfish toxin from toxic sea creatures in a way to be able to use that in espionage and assassinations, the fact that they admitted to that, what are they not admitting to, and what other substances did they have that they didn't admit to or that were never found? So William Colby, who was the CIA station chief in Saigon during the Vietnam War, he was also the de facto architect of the Phoenix program. The Phoenix program, we're going to have to get into that in another show. We will definitely be covering that at some point. There's just too many connections, especially anybody who is a fan of Dave McGowan or Program to Kill. That will be something we get into. So he was the architect of the Phoenix program, along with Michael Aquino, for anyone who knows that name. Mr. Eyebrows, definitely not a bad person. Yeah, right. So the Phoenix program accounted for perhaps 20,000 deaths between 1968 and 1971. He was on the Committee of Present Danger, exactly whatever that is, the 1976 version. A quote from him, "This case is so much bigger than you think. It goes to the very highest levels. We have to keep pulling the strings." And I believe that had something to do with the JFK assassination that he was referencing there. So his death on Saturday, April 27th, 1996, Colby died in what Wikipedia says appears to be a boating accident near his home in Rock Point, Maryland. The official narrative is that the Maryland state coroner ruled that Colby had suffered either a heart attack or a stroke, and then fallen into the water and drowned. Most of Colby's family and his biographer viewed suicide as completely inconsistent with his character. However, in a biographical documentary developed by his son, Carl Colby, he speculated that Colby had simply had enough of this life. I think that's incredibly fascinating. Some have suggested that Colby was revealing information which was damaging to the CIA. His death may have been a CIA damage limitation exercise. The boating accident story has been termed a highly suspicious death, even laughable by some. So let's see, other important things. Let's see, director of the Central Intelligence Agency. There's a question of whether he was the head of the clandestine branch of the CIA, executive director, deputy director of plans, and deputy director of operations. So, I mean, this guy was deep in it. He's a very, very important person. Also, he does pop up in the Franklin scandal quite a bit, which we will also be covering at some point. Let's see here. So let's get back to the thread, shall we? So this is who William Colby is. This is why it matters. And just like everything else, it's once you start digging and you find these connections, it keeps going. They're endless rabbit holes. In 1980, Joseph Holsinger, aide to Congressman Leo Ryan, who was murdered by a Jonestown death squad, exposed the formation of eccentric religious cults by the CIA. Holsinger made allegations at a colloquium of psychologists on psychological implications of the Jonestown phenomenon. Holsinger maintained a CIA support base was colluding with Jones to perform medical and mind control experiments at the People's Temple in Guyana. The former congressional aide cited an essay sent to him in the mail called The Penal Colony. Now, we're not going to get into this today just because this is a massive thread in and of itself. I myself made a different thread, so this will be an episode in and of itself at a later date, but we will be coming back to Jonestown. The author of The Penal Colony, a Berkeley psychologist, who I had just read is actually expected or was suspected to be Dr. Offshay, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, another false memory syndrome member, was actually the author of The Penal Colony, which is really strange. However, the author of The Penal Colony, a Berkeley psychologist, had emphasized rather than terminating MKUltra, the CIA shifted its programs from public institutions to private cult groups, including the People's Temple. Dr. Lawrence Laird Layton, a chemist for the Manhattan Project and head of the Army's Chemical Warfare Research Division in the early 1950s, had a son, Larry Layton. Larry led the death squad to the airship in Guyana, where Congressman Leo Ryan, among 4 or 3 others, were murdered. So, just as stated above, where Congressman Leo Ryan was murdered in Jonestown by a death squad, Dr. Lawrence Layton, his son, Larry Layton, was the one who gunned Congressman Leo Ryan and many others down on the airstrip. Larry Layton was the only one that was actually charged with any crime coming out of Jonestown, which is endlessly fascinating to me. Like I said, we will be back doing a much deeper dive into all of this because it doesn't stop here. So Michael Myers, research and author, spent 6 years digging through all the information he could, which resulted in his book, Was Jonestown a CIA Medical Experiment? I've gone ahead and included a link for anyone that would like to pick up a copy of that from the internet. Of course, it's a PDF version. So Myers concluded after the investigation, he said, quote, "The Jonestown experiment was conceived by Dr. Layton, staffed by Dr. Layton, and financed by Dr. Layton. It was as much his project as it was Jim Jones." So, like I said, the Jonestown rabbit hole, it just keeps going down deeper and deeper and deeper. That will be a episode in and of itself. But to keep things moving forward, so we don't take all day here, like Jonestown, the militant group known as the Symbionese Liberation Army was a mind-controlled creation unleashed by the CIA. Mae Brussel wrote in 1974 that the rabid guerrilla band consisted predominantly of CIA agents and police informers. The SLA was, Brussels said, an extension of psychological experimentation projects connected to Stanford Research Institute and Menlo Park. Okay. So we are going to pull up this article real quick. This is a rather important article to continue the understanding of exactly what is going on. Let's see here. So I thought this was endlessly fascinating because it was actually the History Channel. Let's see here. I just want to make sure that you guys have a full view of the article itself. So okay, there we go. So from history.com, the CIA recruited mind readers to spy on the Soviets in the 1970s. Project Stargate operated between 1972 and 1995 and attempted to offer, in the words of one congressman, a hell of a cheap radar system. During the tense period of the Cold War, the United States government sought to deploy a potential new weapon against the Soviet Union, mind reading, in a highly classified project conducted first in a California research lab in the 1970s and later in an Army base in Maryland. The CIA, Army, and Defense Intelligence Agency recruited men and women claiming to have powers of extrasensory perception, or ESP, to help uncover military and domestic intelligence secrets. So they didn't just recruit men and women. They actually recruit children all the time. This is sorry, I was just reading a comment real quick. So they actually recruit children through our education system, through the Department of Education, which is one of the reasons why it is nationalized. They do it through certain programs such as the GATE program. That's kind of how all of this is connected. They want to know exactly what children have ESP capabilities. And not what's interesting is not all of it is super nefarious. I mean, the fact that they're kind of treating all of us like lab rats is nefarious, but they don't use the military, being they, doesn't use people with ESP abilities only for nefarious purposes, is what I'm trying to get at here. So extrasensory perception to help uncover military and domestic intelligence secrets. So there's many, once again, the rabbit holes are just endless here. Recently, there's a new podcast that have come out, the telepathy tapes, all about children with autism who seem to have extrasensory perception abilities. And it's quite incredible, which just brings up even more questions. But point is they didn't just recruit men and women. A lot of these people were not only, recruited. A lot of these people were experimented on with force or coercion. So it's not quite so rose-colored glassy as this article is making it seem. However, real quick right here, coming from a scientific background, no BS kind of bias, today it is much harder to dismiss CIA programs like remote viewing or this is outside the realm of possibility. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility at all. Like I said, people can just go watch the telepathy tapes. That podcast is absolutely incredible in my opinion. But it is, let's see. And I mean the success of such methods, not that they are crazy enough to attempt them. Yeah, I mean, it's as far as what they were crazy enough to attempt, I mean, all you have to do is look at Operation Acoustic Kitty and realize that they were trying to put microphones into cats to try and spy on people. And of course it failed miserably because you can't tell a cat what to do. But I mean, just look at USAID and all the things that they said that they're spending money on. But I agree, it is incredibly difficult, especially these days, to deny exactly some of these programs. Like it might have been easier. I mean, even just 10 years ago, I've been at this, I guess, whole conspiracy thing for the better part of, oh, geez, 15 years. Wow. That just made me feel really old. Um, I've been at this for quite a while, and it was definitely a lot easier to be called a conspiracy theorist at one point. Not so much anymore. People are definitely a lot more open to it now than ever before. But to keep this going, so in 2017, the CIA declassified some 12 million pages of records, revealing previously unknown details about the program, which would eventually become known as Project Stargate, which has been in the news a lot. Go check out. I have 2 interviews with Gray, a MKUltra survivor and survivor advocate. And we touch on this a lot. Well, not necessarily the remote viewing, but a lot of the background of where this is kind of coming from, who's involved, how it happens, this sort of thing. By the time the program was shut down in 1995, psychics, known as remote viewers, had taken part in a wide array of operations, from locating hostages kidnapped by Islamic terrorist groups to tracing the paths of fugitive criminals within the United States. So, I mean, I find it interesting. It's really kind of funny. I mean, they say it was disbanded, but if the CIA had access to people that were able to have ESP, extrasensory perception abilities, why in the hell would they give that up? This is like, this is absurd. Same with MKUltra. If they had the ability to do this, and they spent millions of dollars, that's not their money, it's our money, it's our tax dollars, why would they just give this up? They wouldn't. They didn't disband it. They rebranded it and moved it along, tried to pretend, yeah, you busted us. We were doing this behind your back. We won't do it again. We promise, fingers crossed. And they just do it anyways and, compartmentalize it, get rid of some people, bring new people in. Like, it's just rinse and repeat, Let's see here. Live to Rebel. Yes, those are some of the stories that convinced me there's more to it, at least. I completely agree. So there's just life is not what we were told, in many aspects, and there's a lot of things about life that's being intentionally hid, in my opinion. The roots of Project Stargate go back to 1972, when a classified report made waves within the U.S. military and agent intelligence communities by claiming that the Soviet Union was pouring money into research involving ESP and psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with the mind. For espionage purposes, in response, the CIA began funding its own top secret research, headquartered at the Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California. California comes up all the time. Of course, Stanford Research Institute, interesting. Ex-Israeli paratrooper Yuri Geller became famous for his ability to bend metal cutlery with his mind, which, this is really interesting. I should bring this up real quick. Yuri Geller, I actually didn't know he was Israeli. Doesn't surprise me by any means at all. Let's see here. Yuri Geller. This just kind of ties things back into false memory real quick, so it's worth it, I promise. Let's see. So, oh, come on. That's what happens sometimes when you do things on the fly, you don't always get exactly what you're looking for. But let's see if we can do this anyways. Let's see. Okay. So what was really interesting, Uri Geller would go around all the time on all the, late night talk shows at the time, particularly Johnny Carson. Well, another person would pop up eventually. James Randi demonstrates how psychic Uri Geller bends spoons and other magic tricks on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Slope. Sometimes it's harmless enough, but other times it's quite dangerous. Personally, I'm opposed to that kind of fakery, so I have no reservations at all about exposing these people and their illusions for what they really are.
I've investigated the claims of hundreds of psychics. People aren't always happy with my conclusions, but I do have my supporters. In 1986, I was honored with a MacArthur Award. Unfortunately, most of the prize money went into defending myself against a series of libel suits related to one of my earliest and most controversial investigations. The subject was Uri Geller, a young Israeli who claimed to have supernatural powers.
His remarkable affinity for metal and his psychic abilities are well documented all over the world.
In the early 1970s, Geller became a superstar, the most famous psychic in the world.
Okay, just a second, look at me. Visualize everything that you drew once more.
He claimed to read people's minds.
I'm gonna show what I got, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but it really came very strong in. It could be two mountains with a round thing on, or two people.
Can I show?
Yeah, I'd like to. Am I wrong?
You're right.
I'm right. Good. That's what I got. Oh, that's...
He claimed to bend keys with his mind.
I know you're going to think this is a setup, friends, and old Tom has never conned you on anything. This guy is bending this key by rubbing it. It was bent at about a 1 degree angle when you started out, and it's coming up on 45 degrees now and still moving.
You're thinking bend, is that what you're doing?
Yes, I'm saying bend.
You're saying bend,
yes.
Hard, soft?
No, I'm saying bend, 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 and sometimes I say bend, baby,
But Geller was best known for his way with spoons.
Hold the tip of the spoon very, very gently.
Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm trying to melt the metal down. Yes, you see, I feel it.
It's
yes,
going.
It's getting loose.
Okay, so, I mean, this is Uri or Yari, however you say his name. So now this brings a whole new dimension to it. So James Randi, famous magician, also False Memory Syndrome Foundation member since the very beginning. There's some things that I'll get into with James Randi later on, but there are some disturbing allegations against him. Now this is really interesting because it's like, well, part of me wants to say, because James Randi is who he, ended up aligning with, makes me want to say, well, he was just trying to defame Geller about his abilities, what we know about the CIA and what they were able to do with certain techniques. Kind of just seems like James Randi came out to debunk something and kind of put the rabbit back into the hat, I guess, close the curtain to stop exposing the man behind the mirror because of what the CIA was. Awesome. Hey, thanks, Jenny. Thanks for tuning in. Check the rest of it if you can. There will be many more streams to come. So thanks for tuning in. What's really interesting is like I said, on one hand, I'm like, okay, well, James Randi is just coming in to close the curtain, hide the man behind the curtain again, because he was aligned with the CIA. However, Uri Geller's also an Israeli, and he was in the media, and so it's like, was he working for other intelligence agencies like Mossad? And then what's his role in all of this? Does he actually have this ability, or is this just all a big, nothing burger, a big bread and circuses kind of a thing? I don't know. This just brings a whole new level to it that I find fascinating. Anyways, James Randi, the whole point of me bringing this up is that James Randi was trying to debunk Uri Geller. And let's see here. Let me bring this back up. And they were discussing him here over in this article about remote viewing and ESP. And so I just, once again, find this incredibly fascinating, just all the connections that are made. So psychic Uri Geller led ESP investigations. Later that year, the research team at SRI invited Uri Geller, an ex-Israeli paratrooper who had become internationally famous for his psychic powers, to Menlo Park. I've been pronouncing that wrong the whole time. Menlo Park for testing. Though Geller was best known for his alleged ability to bend metal cutlery with his mind, the CIA was much more interested in another of his professed skills, the ability to read other people's minds and even control their minds with his own. As Annie Jacobson writes in her book, Phenomena, The Secret History of the U.S. Government's Investigation into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis, the declassified documents show that the CIA analysis wanted to probe Geller's abilities in the arena of mind projection and its possible use for national security purposes. According to Jacobson, Geller played a key role in setting into motion the U.S. government's investigation into ESP and psychokinesis. In the winter of 1975, she writes, Geller even took part in a series of classified psychokinesis tests at a lab in Livermore, California, where scientists were developing advanced nuclear warheads, laser systems, and other emerging weapons technologies. And I'm sure if you dig further into this, you would find people like Jack Parsons and Aldous Huxley and all of these people that end up coming up in these connections. In one experiment for the CIA, Geller was isolated in a room and told a picture had been drawn. He then drew a picture of a square with diagonals drawn. So there it is, I guess. The CIA shut down its work. Yeah, sure it did. Its work with ESP in the late 70s. No, it didn't. And the program moved to the United States Army's Fort Meade in Maryland. Interesting that Maryland keeps coming up too, with things like Fort Detrick and Edgewood Arsenal, where it was funded by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Over the better part of the next 2 decades, Congress continued to approve funds for the remote viewing program. It seems to me a hell of a cheap radar system, Rep. Charlie Rose of North Carolina told fellow members of the House Select Committee on Intelligence during a meeting about psychic research in the 1970s, quote, and if the Russians have it and we don't, we're in serious trouble. It's always with the damn Russians. I mean, I'm not saying they are our friends here, but we have way bigger enemies on the inside. So just to review, to get back now that we've kind of gone out of the way. Let's see. Now we've gone kind of out of the way. Let me fix this real quick. Okay. So Just like Jonestown, the militant group known as the Symbionese Liberation Army was a mind control creation unleashed by the CIA. This is according to Mae Brussels. Mae Brussels wrote in 1974 that the rabid guerrilla band consisted predominantly of CIA agents and police informers. The SLA was, Brussels said, an extension of psychological experimentation projects connected to Stanford Research Institute and Menlo Park. Mae Brussels once said, many of the current rash of senseless killings, massacres, and zombie-type murders are committed by individuals who have been in army hospitals, mental hospitals, or prison hospitals where their heads have been literally taken over surgically to create terror in the community. Hearing this quote, anyone who is a fan of Dave McGowan, Programmed to Kill, I mean, reading this quote and thinking about any of that, it's like alarm bells are ding, 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 just going off like crazy. The first person that comes to mind is Ed Kemper, who would always talk about how there was a person, a second person in him. His sister would always talk about him being in like a zombie-like state. Somebody who spent 5 years in a mental hospital when he was 15 after murdering both of his grandparents. I mean, these are just crazy connections. So things keep getting stranger as we keep going on. SLA leadership was trained by Colton Westbrook. Westbrook was a veteran of the CIA's murderous Phoenix program. Boom. The Phoenix program coming up again, William Colby being one of the people who orchestrated Phoenix. When he trained terrorist cadres and death squads in South Vietnam, which is basically the Phoenix program. In 1969, he took a job at Pacific Architects and Engineers, a CIA proprietary in Southern California. 3 of Colton Westbrook's foot soldiers, Emily and William Harris and Angela Atwood, had been students of the College of Foreign Affairs, a CIA cover at the University of Indiana. After the SLA's gun-toting crime spree, Patricia Hearst had a phone call. It's coming through. Everyone knows who's calling me now. After the SLA's gun-toting crime spree, Patricia Hearst, in preparation for trial, had 3 psychiatrists called in to appraise her state of mind. Dr. Martin T. Orn, Dr. Robert J. Lifton, and Dr. Louis Jolin West. Dr. Robert J. Lifton was the founder of the Human Ecology Fund mentioned earlier, the CIA contractor that showered Dr. Martin T. Orn with research grants in the 1960s. Dr. Louis Jolin West is one of the CIA's most notorious mind control specialists. Not currently, because he has since passed away. He was the director of UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute. It was West who brought a score of mind control psychiatrists to the UCLA campus. More on both of these men later because they keep coming up. Another psychiatrist appears with Dr. Orn in 1991 on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Dr. Margaret Singer, a retired Berkeley PhD, studied reparated prisoners of war returning from the Korean War at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research from 1952 to 1958. Also, where Robert J. Lifton comes from, and Jolly West. along with a lot of other people, but these are three notable people. Singer turned up in 1982 on the book jacket of Raven, which was the CIA's code name for Jim Jones, by San Francisco Examiner reporters Tim Ritterman and John Jacobs, a thoroughly researched account of the People's Temple that sidesteps the CIA involvement entirely. No mention of CIA involvement in any way. And once again, we will be getting into Jonestown. Maybe tomorrow we'll jump into Jonestown, and then maybe SLA after that. Both of these connections are just highly, highly suspicious. I have included a link to Raven for anyone who would like to read that book. It is a good book, but as far as spook connections, don't be looking for any because there aren't any. Let's see. Let's make sure and go check the chat real quick. Make sure I'm not missing anything. All right. If anyone watching this could go ahead and hit the like for me, hit the share, make sure and subscribe. I have a lot of people that watch that don't subscribe. Our big tech overlords have made sure that my channel doesn't want to grow. So the only way I can grow is through help. And the best way to help the channel, subscribe, hit the like, share, leave a comment, anything you could possibly do. And they're all free. That helps a lot. Or go follow me on any of my social medias, any of these other things. Just real quick before we get back into this, I will be having new merch come out. Something happened to my merch store, and I've got to get that back up. But I have a bunch of t-shirt designs which will come out as soon as I can launch my my store again. So be on the lookout for that. I will make a big announcement out of it. There will be a big sale right at first to drum up some sales. So that should be good. And it actually looks like we are at the end. So I guess this kind of does end nicely. I mean, we are at an hour and 15 minutes, a little bit longer than what I wanted to get at anyways. But that is the end of the false memory syndrome, at least part 1. So, okay, to recap just a little bit before we get out of here. Somebody that you need to remember. Let's see, let's just scroll back up. Dr. Martin T. Orne, somebody that will come up a lot. He headed a lot of these decisions. He was funded through the Human Ecology Fund, which is the notorious CIA cover. It's very well known. The CIA definitely documents, or there are many, many documents that prove the CIA is into using secret organizations to be able to fund their operations. Obviously, a lot of the things they do are illegal or super strange, at least on, for the normal people. So they've got to be able to covertly fund their operations. And they do this through many different means, hundreds, thousands, even different organizations. With SEI funding, Orne was able to experiment on prisoners at Holmesburg Prison. Also at Pennsylvania University was able to experiment on students. Doesn't really matter if they were willing to or not. If they wanted subjects, they would find test subjects. Of course, the church committee hearing, it's kind of a big nothing burger. They downplayed the extent of the behavior modification and the mind control testing that they did. William Colby, another person of interest who set up the Phoenix program, he also helped run the CIA. It was a very important person. Ended up destroying most of the MKUltra documents. Luckily, forgot about the financial. Joseph Holsinger, was an aide to Congressman Leo Ryan, who was murdered by Larry Layton and his death squad at Jonestown. Halsinger is the one that maintained the CIA, was in charge of Jonestown. We will be touching on that. Dr. Lawrence Layton, another person of interest, a chemist of the Manhattan Project and head of the Army's Chemical Warfare Research Division, whose son was Larry Layton, led the death squad in Guyana. Michael Myers, researcher and author, spent 6 years digging through the information for his book. Was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment? Very, very great book. Mears concluded after the investigation, the Jonestown experiment was conceived by Dr. Layton, staffed by Dr. Layton, and financed by Dr. Layton. Like Jonestown, the SLA, Symbionese Liberation Army, was a mind control creation unleashed by the CIA. Of course, Patty Hearst, or Patricia Hearst, she was the daughter of a media mogul, basically, the Ghislaine Maxwell of her time to, her dad and her grandpa, which, Robert Maxwell, you see the connection. The SLA, researcher Mae Brussel says, was an extension of psychological experimentation projects connected to Stanford Research Institute and Menlo Park. Mae Brussels once said, many of the current rash of senseless killings, massacres, and zombie-type murders are committed by individuals who have been in army hospitals, mental hospitals, and prison hospitals. Makes a lot of sense. Colton Westbrook, another person of interest. He was SLA leadership. He was trained under the CIA's murderous Phoenix program, which we will be touching on, that coincides a lot with Gladio and many other projects. In 1969, he took a job at Pacific Architects and Engineer, a CIA proprietary in Southern California. Three of Westbrook's foot soldiers, Emily and William Harris and Angela Atwood, had been students of the College of Foreign Affairs, a CIA cover at University of Indiana, another university. Another person of interest, Dr. Robert J. Lifton, founder of the Human Ecology Fund. Now, I've never been able to find information on this, but if anyone does have information on that, go ahead and send it to me. He was the one funding Dr. Martin Orn's research. Of course, Dr. Lewis Jolin West, or Jolly West, he just keeps popping up, head of the UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute, brought all the mind control experts to UCLA. He also taught at, or, cut his teeth at the Walter Reed Medical Center. And of course, we get to Dr. Margaret Singer, not Sanger. Sanger is the Planned Parenthood lady. Dr. Margaret Singer, a retired Berkeley PhD. She was a cult expert and all these different things. Also cut her teeth at the prisoners of war returning from the Korean War at the Walter Reed Army Institute, such as Jay Lifton and Jolly West. She ended up being involved in Raven, the CIA's code name for Jim Jones. And there we go. So there's a quick little recap of everything in case anyone missed anything. But on that note, I want to get out of here. I want to wrap up. Everyone that's been watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully anyone that caught this over on No Way Jose, hopefully I'm able to expand this a little bit so, you could watch both or one or the other, and it's independent enough that it's still entertaining. If there are any questions, please throw them in the chat or leave them down on the video below. We will answer them on the next stream. So moving forward, what I will be doing with Rise to Liberty, the big thing will be live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Today, other than the little setback with the audio and everything, normally a live stream will take place. I was thinking maybe 9, but I don't want to conflict with the morning dump over at No Way Jose and the Underclass podcast with Jose and Austin. So I might push it back a little bit so, we can kind of share audience or anyone, like we're just not conflicting shows. So as of right now, it will be Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 Eastern. Every single every single week. Tuesdays will be more of a scheduled, like planned out show. Thursdays will be more of loosey goosey, kind of just hanging out, talking about interesting things, any interesting news or whatever. So, False Memory Syndrome Foundation Part 2 will be next Tuesday. And we'll still be talking about MKUltra. Maybe we'll dive into some of the sidebars on Thursday, go down the SLA, the Jonestown stuff, and we'll kind of branch out and start building the spider web here. So that's what the plan is. If you haven't already, please hit the like, please hit the subscribe, leave a comment. Our big tech overlords do not want me to grow at all. However, the bigger we do get, the better content I can bring you guys. The more time I can dedicate to actually doing this and bringing you guys better and more well-researched content, which I would love nothing more than to just work on this day in and day out. So hit the like, subscribe, leave a comment, get this out as far as possible. Other than that, all I got to say is thank you so much for tuning in. And let's see here. Keep an eye out on the store. Make sure to go to nadoshaveco.com. Use promo code RICE15, 15% off. And there will be opportunities for people to help out the show. If you want to drop some cash or anything, I'm trying to get my Patreon set up. I'm also trying to get all these other things, but I am a one-man crew. I do everything by myself. Anyone that wants to lend help, please let me know. I'd be more than willing to accept any help you're willing to give. I can possibly pay some people. One last thing before we get out of here. I am looking for, I guess, what's communally known at this point as a schizo clip. I'm looking for a new intro for some of these different series that I'll be doing. So anybody interested that edits and any of these clips, let me know. Send me a message on X. And other than that, we're going to get out of here. So I will see you all on Thursday at 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Eastern. And also see you next Tuesday. And until then, or until next time, stay free, my friends. Whoops.